Psalm 75. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks, for your name is near. We recount your wondrous deeds. At the set time that I appoint, I will judge with equity. When the earth totters and all its inhabitants, it is I who keep steady its pillars. I say to the boastful, do not boast, and to the wicked, do not lift up your horn. Do not lift up your horn on high or speak with haughty neck. For not from the east or from the west, and not from the wilderness comes lifting up, but it is God who executes judgment, putting down one and lifting up another. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine well mixed, and he pours out from it, and all the wicked of the earth shall drain it down to the dregs. But I will declare it forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked I will cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up. The psalmist begins by saying that he wants to recount the great deeds of God, the wondrous deeds of God. Looking out at history, looking out at his own life, looking out at particularly the history of Israel, he wants to recount, to say again, here's who God is and what God has done. We're going to praise his name, this name that is close to us, that is near to us, that's bound himself to us in covenant love. But we need to know something about who this God is. I mean, of what value is it that this God has bound his name to us? And he asserts two fundamental ideas about a God that go intrinsically together. We can't separate them. First, he puts in the mouth of God in verse 2 and 3, at the set time that I appoint, I will judge with equity. When the earth totters and all its inhabitants, it is I who keep steady its pillars. So the two ideas that are going to be expounded in this psalm are held in these two verses. First, we'll start with verse 3 to begin with. When the earth totters, when there's chaos, when there's viruses that have shut down the economy that are killing people, but when the earth begins to shake, when things seem to be coming unraveled, it's God who holds things together, who guides things, who holds up the pillars of the world. When it seems that the evil ones are ruling, when the wicked are kind of having their day and so are undoing the very fabric of what God has designed and what God has made. It's not up for grabs who's in charge of the world. God holds its pillars together. God sustains the world. And the second point is the fundamental way that he does that is through his judgments. You see, as things are shaken, as the world is turned upside down, as things seem chaotic and don't make sense, and we don't know what the future holds, he confesses two things in the face of that. One, God is the one who holds it together, and the way that he holds it together is through his judgments. In other words, as we look out through history, as the psalmist looks out through history, as he looks at his own history, and as we look at our history, we shouldn't see a God who's standing back, who's distant, but who is active, executing his judgments on the righteous and the wicked, bringing about his will, sustaining the earth, and sustaining his redemptive purposes for creation and for his people through particular acts of judgment within history. And now we get really uncomfortable with this. Because what this psalm asserts, in fact, what the whole Bible asserts, is when you look out at the history of the world and you see trouble and you see governments put down and other governments raised up, and you see plagues come and difficulties come, these are not random acts that have come from the east or the west. It is God himself who lifts up viruses, who lifts up tragedies, who judges the wicked, who establishes the righteous. And so the psalmist draws our attention to the history of the world and doesn't separate it from the character of God, but says, now I want to recount to you the great deeds of God by reminding you that he holds the world together, and he does so through his judgments in history, his particular judgments in history. Now, in the light of that, the psalmist then makes this kind of sweeping assertion about where all of history is headed. That God will raise up the righteous. He will, in the end, care for his people, raise up those who are humble before him, who know him, who love him, who trust his word, who obey his law, and he will put down the wicked. If you want to know where all of history is headed, that's ultimately where it's headed. And in light of that, he sets out this warning. He uses the language of that we would use to describe an ox or a bull. And he says in verse 4, I say to the boastful, do not boast, and to the wicked, do not lift up your horn. Do not lift up your horn on high or speak with haughty neck. But when you understand that this is how the world works, when you understand that this is who God is and the power and the might that he exerts throughout history and how his judgments will always go, the warning is don't lift up your horn. If you think about the horn on a bull or an ox, it's the means by which it asserts its own authority. It kind of declares its own power. The neck of an ox, if it's a haughty neck, if it's a self-ruling neck, it can't be yoked. It can't be guided by the farmer. It can't be guided by the one who's to rule it. And so the warning set out was you understand that this is how God works. This is how the world is. Don't boast in your own power. Don't assert your own authority and your own greatness and your own might. Don't have a haughty neck, a neck that resists the rule of God, that is absolutely emphatic on its own authority. Now submit to this God. Be humble before this God. Live as a righteous man. Live as a righteous woman. Live as those who are submitted to the God who rules the universe with absolute righteousness, and is raising up kings and putting down kings, who's fulfilling all of history, fulfilling his judgments in actual history. Don't be marked by haughtiness. Don't be marked by resistance to his rule. No, be submissive to him. And here's this grave warning in verse 8. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine well mixed. And he pours out from it, and all the wicked of the earth shall drain it down to the dregs. This is an image that Jesus himself uses to describe what he's doing as he goes to the cross. On behalf of all those who will cling to Jesus, all those who have faith in Jesus, humble themselves before this God, trust in the work of Jesus on the cross, that Jesus drinks this wrath on their behalf. Oh, but don't be confused about what God is doing. God is judging the wicked. He is raising up the righteous. And only those who trust in Jesus, who cling to Jesus and his righteousness, and in that place learn what it means to submit to this God, to love this God, to be obedient to this God, to not raise up their own horns, to resist the rule of God. These are the ones who will know the salvation of God. And look with me finally how it ends. The psalmist says, and I will declare it forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. He insists on singing the praises of God forever. Why? Because God actually is, in history, through judgments, through his sovereign action in history, he's cutting off the horns of the wicked, but he's raising up the horns, the glory, the might of those who belong to him.